better. Right. So yes, I'm going to talk about this Jenkins 2.0 proposal that I've already sent to the dev list about a week ago. And then so this is supposed to kind of, it's a big post and a lot of discussions in there. So in an attempt to sort of create the presentation version of it. So that's what this is about. So before I get to the meat of the Jenkins 2.0, I wanted to kind of start from some of the recent features that we've been working on that kind of got me thinking down the road of the Jenkins 2.0, like how it started from here and then ended up there. So one of them is the workflow. So hopefully you've seen all these pitches, right? Nowadays it's very common for people to not only do like a build and test automation, but stitch them together in some interesting ways, and often called as also known as the continuously pipelines. So today, well, traditionally the way you do it in Jenkins is by putting together lots of different jobs by means like the upstreams, downstreams, parameterized triggers, promotions, build flow, stuff like that. So it's great that it's doable, but there's this feeling of assembly required. Every user has to go through all this process of putting together PCs, and it's great that we have lots of PCs. We have no less than 1,000 of them now. But to actually get to what you want, like a tractor or a airplane or ship or whatever, then you need to learn through how to use these PCs and combine them in ways. You need to discover the right plugins to mix. Some plugins don't necessarily work well together or design together. So all in all, it translates to some major upfront investment. Like a fairly steep learning curve is there. So in the workflow, right, we've been trying to solve all these problems in one unified story. So with the workflow plugin, you can do this kind of pipeline assembly as one project by using the code. So you can script these things. So I've been starting to code these things as pipeline as code, but because it's codified, it has all these interesting control flows like parallels, if conditional statement loops and so on, intermixed with Jenkins concepts like allocating new slave node, assigning workspace, forking off checking out the source code and capturing the changelog, archiving artifacts, looking at the test reports, all the other stuff. And then this is since a brand new subsystem, right? It's we've used the opportunity to fix some of the long-standing issues. So the one of them being able to survive the restart of the master or loss of the communication between master and slave. So say if you have a test run that takes like 5 hours to go, and then if you lose the communication to that slave in the middle, then with the Jenkins workflow you can just have them reconnect, and then it will still remember what it was doing. Whereas traditionally in the freestyle jobs, as soon as you lose the communication, the build is considered failure. So it creates like this dreaded pressure for the Jenkins admins to wait until everything is quiet in the Friday evening before they restart Jenkins. And it adds extra pressure to the stability of the master-slave communication, that sort of things. So that's been, we've been at this for quite a while now. It's at the 1.10. We came a long way, and then now, so because we have all this foundation built, in the last few months is, this my focus, and one of the key directions that we are taking workflow to is to, think about the reusing and then think about making it easier. Well, it's great that you can express these things as code and version control them and so on. But it also creates this another sort of inherent complexity, the barrier to the entry for the people who finds this just too much work. So one of the thinking is, well, if you're in place where things like this matters, well, you probably got a lot of things that's built in the same, almost identical manner. So here in the Jenkins community, right, most of the things we built are plugins, they're all built, tested, released in exactly the same way. If you're doing like a microservices, then you probably have a lot of apps that needs to be built, tested, deployed in the exact same way too. So what if instead of asking these product developers, the Jenkins users, they write something like this for each of the project? If we can go down to this, right? So like you as an organization, like one guy, if you can take this Jenkins, the workflow definition, and then define this organizational idiom, like basically capture how the company does this CD pipeline. And then you only provide each product. You only really just need to provide a small number of parameters. In this case, just the name of that software. I'm sorry, just the name of that software. So, and then as a release engineering guy, you can define these organizational idioms or custom DSL, and then quote unquote deploy them into Jenkins. And then your Jenkins will instantly, understand your local idioms, and then it can talk in much higher level language. So, and then the way you define this will be still pretty simple in terms of the workflow. So you define just one function and put them into this ACME, the service of Groovy, and then that's how you could and you can see that you can use this parameter and so on to expand to the variables and then get stuff done. So with this, most of the users, it's going to be only seeing just one line Jenkins file, so it's a lot easier, and they don't even need to really know that that's written in Groovy or the fact that it's actually executable and whatnot. So actually, I think features like this have a lot of use cases around. If you're doing microservices, that's fun. The fact that you can retain the central control as a release engineering guy, and at the same time make your lives easier for the engineers who don't have to be Jenkins experts, and so on. So with this, with something like this, the Jenkins using workflow become as easy as one create Jenkins file in the repository, to put that one-liner, right? No longer like a no more try-catch statement or like no more need for understanding what that Jenkins workflow actually is like. And then you can create the job in Jenkins, and all you have to configure there is to point to the version control repository. Right? So it's much easier. And then with that kind of direction, like we started taking this even further. Right? How can we make it even easier? Because I think that's one of the key challenges in Jenkins is this perceived complexity, like a perceived runway before you can get up and running. So, so that's kind of the next tier of the work that we are doing, which is I'm dubbing as a pipeline as code. So here I have my Jenkins instance, and then we, basically took it to the next logical step. So I have a made-up organization called Cloud Beers. Imagine this is a company that's producing, the high-quality beers as a software, as a service, let's say. So, so we made it in this pipeline as code. What we could do is I can create this one-time association between this GitHub organization and Jenkins. So I create that, and then I specify that this is the name of the organization, and then here's a credential that I use to scan them. With just this one setup, now Jenkins understands all your repositories, and then so it's looking at all your Jenkins files in all the interesting branches of all the repositories, and start doing the build. So it picks up those two out of a bunch of repositories. It picked up those two repositories. And it looks at every branch that's worth building, and then it does so. And if I create, so that's really like all the configuration you have to do. So imagine if I'm the engineer working on this software, and then what I might do is let's say I create this repository, and then let's say I'm going to make some changes, right? So let's say I'm going to remove those sleep statement, Very much faster build. And I'm going to create a pull request for this guy. Faster. And so just by doing that, it picks up, it'll pick up this new pull request that I just created, pull request 5. And it should, yeah, it now successfully passed that build and so on. So a lot more things happen automatically now without you interacting with Jenkins manually at all. And likewise, if I create a new repository, so let's say, let me create like new, this company is now branching onto like IPA, let's say. So, and then maybe I should also actually, let's create, where's my big window? I can just, say if I have the source code here, doing IPA, then I can just this one instruction. And then again, remember this could be something like a CME service bar instead of an echo. And then I can just set up CI, and then push this up to the master. And then maybe I should create just another repository. This one I'm not interested in building, so let's say just documentation, so no build associated with it. And just by creating this repository, so it's now in the process of figuring out what's interesting branch in the IPA to be building. So it set up the CI process around you. So not that page. No recursion. Just very briefly, right? The where we are trying to get from here. Just a moment, please. Is that something like this, I think, really drastically changed the user experience of Jenkins. It makes it a lot easier, a lot more automatic, a lot more accessible. It eliminates this, the problem for some people of this huge configuration page in the freestyle project that has to be scrolled up and down for a number of pages. It provides the kind of features that the people today need that we didn't need back then, right? When we started Jenkins, the GitHub did not exist. But today, everyone has similar services, the repository hosting services, if not GitHub, that needs this kind of thing. So I think, so that this is a kind of a new, very different user experience surface for Jenkins that I think going forward is more relevant to users. And likewise, there's another one around containers, right? So I guess in this audience, I don't intend to go through the whole thing, but in the past, 2 years or 3 years now, I guess, the Docker has been sweeping the industry, and it's been everywhere now. We use that inside Jenkins project to run our infrastructure. So partly based on that experience, and partly with the help from other Docker experts in company like inside CloudBees, like the Nicola and Michael, we've been adding a lot of Docker-related stories, starting from something very simple, like just building a container and publishing it, to unify the credential for the Docker's plugins, integrating into the Docker Hub notifications. And so we are starting to build, the story for this continuous delivery for Docker images that also works in conjunction with this kind of Jenkins files and pipeline and so on. So, while we got a lot more work to do, I think we have a good starting point that's actually quite relevant to a number of people. So these are the kind of effort that's been going on lately, all in the space of the plugins. So with kind of that 10-minute intro pitch for the Jenkins 2.0, I see in the IRC that I'm sort of starting to turning off some people. So let's get to the meat of that, right? So that's the that's the kind of context, the background in my mind that led up to this. Now, if I look back at the if you look back at the Jenkins project, right? It's been this project has been around for 10 years, and we made a tremendous stride in taking this project forward. It started as my hobby project under my desk, running on the spare computer. To today we have more than 1,000 plugins, written by all kinds of people around the world. Most of us we haven't even met each other, and then we also boast the 100,000 installations now. And then to quite somewhat surprisingly, these 100,000 installations are still growing quite rapidly at the pace of about 30% year over year. So put another way, this year, right now I think, this year we're looking at about 30,000 installations, 30,000 new Jenkins installations that's starting from scratch into this community. So that's a lot of people that's going through the experience of Lego block assembly, that to figure out the right formula to set up what they're trying to do. And then so I think even that, I think I started thinking about, well, what's necessary to make it relevant for the next 10 years to come, right? So that's the kind of the starting point here. I think the one important difference when I look back at what it was, how it was when I started it versus what it is today, is that I think the frontier of the automation has really drastically shifted. Back then, when I first launched Jenkins, my goal was maybe just having some place where I'm building it all the time. I'm building my software all the time. Every time I commit my changes, so that if I break the build, I get notified. And the QA people, they're interested in having a place to run their tests all the time and see the result. So that's in today's standard, that's all very modest goals. Now today, 10 years fast forward, today, we are still, obviously need to do that, but what people are looking for a lot more than that. They want this process to be integrated into their code review process or the Git branching strategy. They're trying to do the automated, the deployment or even the releases. And in general, the chain of automation got a whole lot longer. So, but in contrast, if I look at actually, what the Jenkins is telling people today, I think it's still very much unchanged from 10 years ago. So I think the Jenkins needs to adjust our messages so that, what people find what they're looking for in us. Right? So our website, if you look at it, it spends more time talking about, let's say, the JNLP, starting Jenkins through JNLP than Docker. And it spends more time talking about this external job monitoring job type, which really not that many people are using. And then no mention of the pipeline or the workflow. A product out of the box, it comes with the CVS and Subversion plugin pre-bundled. But it doesn't have Git. And then, in the past 10 years, the market share of the version control system has traditionally, they're completely changed. So we are just not keeping up with, we are just not providing people the kind of experience they're looking for. And then, a great deal of stuff happened in this community. Like I mentioned just a few of them, workflow and the Docker-related stories. But there are just a whole lot more of those. But still, they're all mostly done in the space of plugins. And then so whenever one of those 30,000 new installations come up, they have to go through this manual and assembly process. And I think these things, while one by one, it might not seem like a big deal, especially for those of us who've been with Jenkins for a long time, right? Like, when I launch my new Jenkins instance, the first thing I do is to go to the plugin manager and install the plugin that I need. But if you're new to Jenkins, that by itself is a fairly substantial barrier to the entry. So these little cuts, they compound to create very poor user experience. So I think we need to. I think it's time to fix that. I think we should be able to fix it. It's really, we got lots of interesting, cool things going, but we are just not selling them, or selling is not the right term, but we are just not pitching it in the right package almost, and that's I think a real bummer. So that's the kind of motivation, right? We can talk about the kind of user experience that we are pushing for now. The ones that I talked about, the workflow, the ones that I talked about in Docker, and those things, people are looking for those today, and those stories are becoming more and more relevant. But it's really well hidden behind this like a 1,000 plugin wiki page, plugin listing page rather. So given that as the background, I think the goal for this effort is one, to sort of, we want to claim this continuous delivery space so that when the product, our software and our website tells people the relevant message that they need to hear, right? They come to the Jenkins page because they heard about it, and they have these problems they are trying to solve. So they are trying to sort of figure out what we offer in Jenkins is what they need. And then so when we tell them, instead when we talk about the glory of the CVS plugin and the Java Web Start support and so on, it's just completely irrelevant for them. And then so I think the sort of messaging change is a critical part of it. I think changing messaging is one thing, but if the product doesn't speak for itself, then that's a problem, right? So we also need to revisit the experience of Jenkins, and with particular focus on the out-of-the-box experience, I think, because that's where people suffer. And also, for quite some time, I think the changes that we've been making to the core tends to be driven by the needs for the plugins, or the needs from the heavy users that sort of already learned the way of Jenkins, so to speak. So I think we can give it a fresh look about things that the people use every day, and then there are a lot of things like room for improvements. Like my favorite example is everywhere I go to this hackathon, it's common to hear this feedback that, oh, it'd be really super nice to be able to disable a build step, just a checkbox, so that you can effectively comment that out, and then bring it back in. And then people need that just to selectively rerun the portion, or people need that when they're trying out the new configuration change, things like that. It's a very easy change, but we've never managed to finish it because none of the plugin developers are asking for it. And then another one might be if the build fails, the chances are pretty good that the last 50 lines or 20 lines or something like that of the console output contains the error. So that's something you always want to see. When I see a failure, the first thing I would go is to look at the console output to see how it failed. So again, that's something very easy to implement, but it hasn't been done just because we didn't have that kind of perspective. So we should be, I think we should be fixing those. And then the third, I think, is it's very important as we do this that makes Jenkins great, which is this ecosystem and huge community of people around it. So I think that's the one important consideration when we are doing this. And then so as I started putting these things together, I think it started to become clear that to achieve the kind of goal here, the version number 2.0 sends, I think, a very clear message for the people who are outside the community. It has certain connotations. It could mean different things for different people. So that's the kind of risk of calling this 2.0. But despite that, I think what we are trying to tell people is that look, it is a different experience now. Jenkins is trying to help meet the needs that you have more easily, and then you don't need to do as much assembling as it used to be, while you could still take the experience once you get started to any degree that you want to. So when we say 2.0, I think it has sort of it reaches more audience eyes more effectively. So that's why I'm calling this the Jenkins 2.0, even though this is in some way deviating from like semantic versioning, right? So here I'm saying we are not really doing any like a major backward incompatible changes, but it's still 2.0 because of these reasons, because we need to reach to the ears of the people who tried Jenkins in the past and moved on. So here's the aspirational timeline in the sense that I think this needs to be, I think this cannot be like an 18 months project. This needs to be like 6 months, maybe like an 8 months kind of project, right? So don't put too much don't put too much emphasis on the actual dates in here, but the one is that right now we are talking about this incompatibility, right? So I guess the thread in the dev list has been going on for about a week or two right now, and then I think it's gonna hopefully continue some more. We are starting to branch out into different topics. So there's one about the website. There's I think we need to, it's one of my to-dos is for us to produce more materials about the kind of features that we are planning to put, the pipeline as code and so on that I just talked about. And then, but we need to start nailing the details here, like figuring out more details of what exactly which exchanges that we are trying to target, and then start marching toward that, and then so the execution would follow. And so we need to basically, putting all this implementation work, and during that course, we need to produce periodic alpha releases and beta releases so that the people can try them out and give us what they think. And we also need the sort of concerted, I guess, the PR activities, as in like we want our blogs to talk about what's landing into the DAO. We want the blog to promote our blogs or Twitter accounts to promote the interesting discussions that's happening in that context. And at the end of this, I think we need to produce a fairly stable RC, and then basically declare that the work in the core for 2.0 would be done. And then let's spend some time going through the like a 2.0 readiness check in the plugins. And I've already mentioned this a few times, and I'll cover this once again. But we are really not planning to make any major breaking changes. But still, given that it's probably going to be more disruptive than average updates, I think it's good to make sure that the major plugins are functioning as expected, and so that the users have more confidence in upgrading. And then when all these things are ready, hopefully, I put it here in the end of January, but let's say at some point in the early next year, it'll be ready. And then so we'll make some, again, the PR efforts to announce that, and then encourage people to move on. And I think it's kind of critical for us to, build migrate people as quickly as possible to avoid the situation of, say, Python 2, Python 3 situation. So my proposal is we really shouldn't spend any more time working on 1.x than, let's say, our current LTS process mandates. And even that already kind of provides a long tail. So I believe the next LTS baseline choice would happen in February. And then, I think the chances are still pretty good that would pick 1.x based thing as LTS, and then that gets supported for another 3 months. So, we could be, in effect, we have a train that supports 1.x until midsummer next year. So I think that's already plenty long, and then we don't want, for the reason I'm going to touch later, I think it's dangerous to leave those two things hanging around too long. So I think this is a kind of arguably somewhat unusual kind of 2.0 pitch for the open source projects, because it's really like product. It has some the product focus, if you may. Right, so we are not incrementing the major version number because because we are adding a breaking changes. So part of the reason I'm trying to be extra careful in pitching these ideas to you guys is that I want to make sure that the developers in the community get the idea why we are doing this. Because I mean, we all know how to assemble these Lego blocks. We've done that, and we thrive in it. We excel at that. And then, so the kind of problem we are seeing, we see as a Jenkins user, is not the kind of problem we are trying to address here. And like in many ways, for most of us, we really couldn't care less about these new users, because that's already behind us. But nonetheless, if you think about the project overall and make sure that it stays relevant to these 30% new users that's joining us every year, then I think it's incredibly important. So that's the sort of the key reason I'm spending so much slides and time to talk about this. And then so on the flip side, I think we also need to contain the scope. Okay, so the 2.0, the world 2.0 could mean many things to many people, and we all have a long list of technical debts that we wanted to pay down, and like APIs that we wish we could have redone, and things like that. And then there's some sense to it, but we need to be very careful spending we need to be very, very careful where to spend this precious time on. And then instead, I really think it should be focused on more user visible things, the UX stories, things like that. And also, I think we really need to avoid disruptive 2.0. So the situation that I'm worried about is that if the users perceive upgrade to 2.0 as too risky, I mean, it's already, right off the bat, the 2.0 sounds more scary than the regular update. But if it's any more than this, if it feels any scarier than necessary, and if enough people start to feel like they have to postpone upgrade for whatever reasons, maybe because plugins don't work or because they've seen some horrible quality, they've seen some horrible bug reports about the stability of 2.0 or whatever, and then people would held back. And these large users tends to be the one that are writing plugins, or the other plugin developers would see more input bug reports and requests for users running on 1.x. So they feel like they'll be pressured, they'll be steered to support these 1.x versions. And then that ends up making 1.x more comfortable, and then it creates this vicious cycle of people leaving, staying behind in 1.x and just keep hoping to keep on going. Again, this is like a Python 2.3 situations. And I think that's effectively forking this project within those two different versions. And I really think we need to avoid that. And that means, I think, so as not to create that fear among users, that we really cannot afford to break plugins, at least any significant number or intentionally. I mean, we have some error cover here, because when we say 2.0, right, the expectation is that it is going to be more disruptive than the regular 1.632 to 1.633 upgrade. So we have we can do some bold changes, and then there are some of those. But if we must end up massively breaking plugins, some of which are and let's not forget that we have a lot of plugins people have developed in-house that needs to be kept going as well. So if you end up breaking too many plugins, and if people feel like, if the large deployment feel like, oh, I can only upgrade after going through all these plugins, and there are like 5 plugins that one of the contractor wrote 3 years ago that we don't know how to upgrade, then that's going to be a problem. So similarly, I think we cannot afford to have this data incompatibility. So people spent a lot of effort in building their Jenkins instance and configuring those. So if you create the fear that some of those things might be lost during upgrade, or if they have to redo it, then that's going to be a significant barrier that would end up turning away a lot of people. So we cannot do that either. And then so those two things, I think the points generally, we cannot I think we need to refrain from massive internal changes. And you know, the is if I and then here I think I always think of like a Maven 2 versus Maven 3 as an example. I'm sure this is an oversimplified story, and in this community we have a lot of people who are also Maven committers. So I don't want to paint them in a bad picture. But the impression that I get is now, so this project like went through the major upgrade, like a version 2 to version 3, and they basically redone a lot of guts, right? Replaced a lot of internals. So the IOC container was changed to something more modern. Dependency resolution engine was completely replaced. So almost like a brand new internals. And then, but they needed to keep all the plugins working that the people have developed. And then so the project spent a lot of time building the backward compatibility layer on top of those new shiny guts. And then so after like a year or 18 months of this effort, a new version came up. But as a user, well, what's the new feature that I got? Well, maybe I got the parallel build that may or may not work, at least until all the plugins get upgraded. And really, that's it. And then so, from the user's perspective, I felt like, the project lost a great opportunity to actually make the lives of the user more easier. But instead, they went to go fix the internals. And I think that's a mistake. I think that's a mistake for this project. So, so we need to avoid that as well. So I think all these constraints given that all these constraints that we operate under, I think the Jenkins to the DO is more of a evolutionary to the DO than the evolutionary one, right? So we are not starting this from scratch. We are instead taking a lot of good things that happen in the plugin community and then make it a part of the critical story of the Jenkins. And we are trying to improve the life of the first user, as well to improve the feature that everyone uses every day. So in these goals, I think we have three major pillars here. The one is the messaging changes, so most primarily around the website. And two, I think to back up. So that's the speak the speak part. The second pillar would be walk the walk part. So we want to make sure that the Jenkins itself speaks to the features and stories that people are asking for today. And more concisely, like I described it here as a continuous delivery needs, but it's really like a kind of broader. I mean, I don't mean the CD as a buzzword, but I mean more broader automation that the people are doing today. And it's really to support those goals, and then to leverage the opportunity to what this major version increment, let's spend some targeted internal plumbing changes that would be necessary to make us relevant for the next 10 years. So let's look at those in a bit more details here. The one I think is the first one was messaging change. So I sent this. I had this in the proposal that, well, if you're trying to pitch that, well, you're about to see CD, we are going from CI to CD, as in we are trying to broaden the coverage, then it's kind of a problem that we have a CI in the domain name. So, well, I said the Jenkins.cd is available, and I think we actually already acquired this domain at our hand, so we could use it. And then, I've seen some more pushback on this about the community. So, so I need to. But hopefully now you understand that the overall motivation and how this is coming from. And I got the action item to approach the owner of the Jenkins.org and so on. But I don't have too much hope that we'll actually be able to get it. And then two, I think we need this. The thing that the people look at when they first land to the Jenkins page, if you're a new user shopping for a solution to your problem, then I think what you need is this like a 5-minute pitch that describes all the key features, and then you hope that they kind of resonate with those users. And right now, the page we have for that is this page I created 10 years ago on java.net, and that really hasn't changed since then. So we should have that, and then everywhere you go, like, if just about any software project you go, they have this kind of intro page that discuss the major highlights. So we should do that. And third, the next level up from there is, you want to have this, I guess, the getting started guide, which is basically what I mean. What I mean by that is, if you're new users and you kind of bought into that 5-minute pitch about all the features, then you need some help getting up and running to get to some point of success. So I guess on Jenkins, that success could look like you have some existing you have an existing repository on your GitHub, and you have the build and test going for that. That would be a success. So we want to help people get to that point. Or we know that there are a lot of people, let's say, want to use Docker as a build environment. So let's have some authoritative documentation so that people can feel comfortable going through them to get to some good result, as opposed to every time, as opposed to the state of the art today, which is every time someone wants to do something, they need to go hit Google and then look at all the posting, the questions, and Stack Overflow and the users list and the bug trackers to try to stitch together the pictures that what other people are doing. So we need to help that. And obviously, we need to continue to carry over the blog. That's a very important means. I think that's probably the most important media the project has to reach to the users and the broadcasting what we are doing and sort of engage them. So we need to do that. And I think in the past, one of the challenges in the blog is that the access to it has been really limited to a few people. So in effect, it's like really Tyler and me for the longest time. And we try to engage others in the community in terms of the guest post, but it's not, it hasn't really been painful. And then so we lost this important part of the power of the community, which is that all these people doing all these interesting projects on top of Jenkins that we wanted to highlight. So I think it's important to make it easier for people to contribute to blogs. So that's, I think, another part of the change. And while I think already this is already a long enough list for the initial launch, but I think in the future we want this to continue to cover more things, right? Like a plugin directory page is a great example. I started that when we only had 20 plugins. And back then that was adequate. Like if you only have 20 plugins, you can easily have a bullet list of 20 things, and that's okay. But by now, like it's really completely broken down. Like you can't just you can't have like a 1,000 line long bullet list that covers everything and they'll be meaningful. So it would be really nice if our website can grow in the future to do this in better ways. So given those considerations, I think, and then also I think our interest in the community in the past, I think this is a high time to redo the infrastructure for doing website. So today, our website are basically split between Confluence and Drupal. The Drupal being landing page and some static pages. And the blog most notably, and then the Confluence where everything else is. And I think we should switch to the static site generation-based scheme. So we have let's say we have a Git repository that contains all these articles and pages and whatnot as like a Markdown or ASCII doc or some textual format. And then we allow people to send in either directly edit those things or send in pull requests. And then there are some pages that we want to control more carefully. Right? I think in the past, when we let people edit the landing pages in Wiki, bad things have happened. So there are some parts of that website we want to control access more carefully, but there are others, these individual plugin pages that really up to individual plugin developers to maintain. And then so we want those to be, have the same feel when it comes to editing. So that's, I think we can get that with the static site generation combined with the current, various features in GitHub that I think they make it very easy for people less technical to create the pull request automatically and so on. So I think we can mostly retain the experience of feel of the wiki, like there's the edit button that lands you to the editor page, and then if you press a big red button, then it creates, it submits a change kind of thing. And then if it works out well, I think we can hopefully retire Confluence and then just migrate the content into this one scheme. I've already seen, I start to see some of the key developers, just see almost like a mentally checked out from the Confluence because it's either so slow or whatnot. And it's been kind of painful to run for the infra team as well. It has been not particularly performant, and we have to add a lot of custom pieces in and around them to be able to get going. And then our Confluence version is already hasn't been upgraded because in the newer version they got rid of the texture representation altogether, so a number of automation will stop working as well. So I think that's kind of, to me, the important part. And two, the product needs to, the Jenkins as a software needs to speak to its own experience. So there's already a work underway, and then there's a lot of discussion about that in the dev list and pull request about creating this initial setup wizard. So what we are trying to do here is to get users started right off with the right set of plugins that we think is telling the right stories that's resonating with users. And then you've seen that hopefully you've seen the security advisory that there are what seems like a scripted attack against unsecured Jenkins instances. And then so the another thing the setup wizard could do is to help people set up the security again right from the beginning. So help people get up and running more quickly, guide them through the right part of the Jenkins to get going. The UX refresh is another big part of it. I think it really helps when the software looks different, when we are trying to tell the story that it is a different software. So, the configuration page is getting a major revamp. You might have seen some of the YouTube videos that the Gus has posted that there's a branch going on to basically replace the current table-based layout in these pages to div-based one. And that's allowing in turn to create a lot more interactivity in these things. So I think that should be a critical part of this. And then, delivering this modern functionality out of the box, I think, is important as well. So there's the workflow functionality. I think we are actually going to rename as pipeline, as that seems to be the industry's common terminology nowadays. And I talked about the pipeline as code, right? I really think that's the kind of that kind of pitch I think resonates with today's audience a lot more. More people trying to do things based on code, trying to remove the state out of Jenkins instance and so on. Features like folders, which really is a fundamentally integral part of the experience, but that's still bundled. Today it's just a plugin that to be installed separately. I think it should be really the built-in part of it. And then I got the company to open source, so the club is to open source the workflow stage view. This is a visualization, much needed visualization on top of the workflow. So we are going to help this Jenkins 2.0 effort. We are going to open source that, and I think it's going to be a great part of the out of the box story in Jenkins. And in terms of internals, I laid out that let's have more a transparent policy about removing deprecated APIs. If you look at the code, you can see some of the APIs that's deprecated but been there for 5 years or something like that. And I think we can, if we institute some policy, then that would help us have higher velocity, and we don't have to carry all these baggage around forever. There's another very exciting work to bring in the very different, more modern front-end development methodologies. So instead of using Jelly and tag leaves and behavior.js and prototype, there's a new stack that's being put together that allows you to write common JS modules that's referencing each other, and using Browserify from the Node.js to stitch them at and then load them at the runtime so that the fragments from different plugins can cooperate nicely. And then you can use the modern like a template, like a JavaScript templating engine, like Handlebar or the Mustache, and then so on to build the front end. So some of the new UX effort, like that you might have seen, like a new setup installation wizard and so on, that's already using this technology, I believe. And I think I think it will help make it easier for developer today to hack on Jenkins. And then I think we also want to use this opportunity to do some selected library updates. So my go-to example is Groovy. We've been bundling very old versions. The community has been asking us to upgrade because a lot of plugins depend on it, but we haven't because we are just too afraid that something like that would distract more people. So I think actually there's a proposal. The current proposal on the record is to start hiding Groovy from the core, and then push them out into a plugin so that it could be separately installed. But really, the intent, regardless of whether it ends up in a plugin or the core, the idea is let's use the opportunity to bump that up. And because we are setting aside some time to sweep through plugins, if we discover any issues, we can correct them and fix them before it hits the general audience. And likewise, I think I think it's high time to move to Java 8. It improves a lot of things for us, including a better backward compatibility maintenance story. There's some major downside to this as well, like the Maven plugin support. But yeah, so that's something to be considered. And then Servlet 3.1. So that would allow us to do. I think that's actually more probably interesting for users because it would allow us to do a lot more like a server-side push. So today a lot of things in Jenkins needs to be deloaded. The browser needs to be deloaded for you to see the updated changes. But it's really not the experience people expect today. And when I do training and so on, it's really painfully obvious. My favorite one is in the list view page. Like when the build starts, it starts flashing, and people are just waiting for that flash to stop. And then I tell them, oh, you actually have to reload the page to see it. And they are like, oh, okay, I didn't know that you have to do it. And so that's how people's expectation has changed. So you need to keep up with that. So I think that's kind of the big, so the kind of big outlines of the proposal. There's a lot more discussion going on in the mailing list, but I think it's I need in many ways I need your help to solidify this plan, put more details, start recording what the consensus is, and start marching toward the executions. But otherwise, we can spend months just talking about what to do without actually not doing anything. So at some point in the true open source manner, we should stop blocking people who are trying to do it. So we want to have in many ways. I'm trying to sort of have all the conversation now that we can, and then we get to the plan that a lot of people can get behind, and then start marching. So I need your help in terms of I need to hear from you. You need to tell us, and you need to help me move this forward, that sort of thing. So that's basically the extent of the slide that I have. So let me switch back to the Hangout and then stop the presentation here. So yeah, so what do you, let's see. So yeah, what do you think?
So the branding and messaging stuff, I understand that that's what's driving the 2.0 label, but what are we thinking about stability and performance improvements that may require more drastic changes in the core than we would normally be comfortable doing in a standard release?
So let's say stability fixes that require more drastic change. So what are those? Do you have some specific things in mind?
Memory usage, storage.
Right. So the storage came up in the conversation from a number of times, including from you.
Mainly from me.
Yeah, mainly so. Well, no, I mean, to be fair, it's not. I mean, it's not just you. So the Google in Juice made that. I think made a comment about that. Surya from Groupon, he did well, and he spoke with his action with .ci. Then we've been aware of this. So I'm trying to think. So so you saw the constraints that I'm trying to operate in. So that's kind of the challenge for me. But I am starting to think that maybe there are ways to sort of have a bit longer term plan for this. So let's say we put in, we put it as one of the goals for 2.x lines, like we are moving there because it's kind of I think it's clearly an important program. And then we built some tentative plans that say I think the thinking in the past and that so far we've been marching somewhat slowly is let's say let's start with picking up some stuff from .ci where when you look at how .ci did it, it's really clear how he did that loading part pluggable, and then we can embrace that in a core. And then so that would let you move off to some parts of the build configuration. But we still keep the file system around. And next, we come up with another data store to push the console output, and or a more generalized blob store that allows the plugins to store random bits. And over time, we go through the plugins, and then we move the file system dependency one by one, so that more of them would support those. But right off the bat, if you're already in that kind of mindset, if you're doing things like Surya is doing, if you're selectively picking plugins for your kind of use case, then you can have a file system less Jenkins. I think that could. I don't know. I need to think some more about this and write down this, but yeah.
So I guess that my concern is that this is our biggest version number change ever, and if we continue with the same versioning model going forward, then we're setting ourselves up for a situation where we can't do any drastic changes in the future without it becoming 3x. So maybe we move to a 2.x.y version so that we have the ability to do a 2.1 down the road with more drastic changes than we would normally do?
Okay. I'd like to keep the current. In many ways, I think. I like to keep the current scheme. So I don't intend to do 3.x in 10 years. I mean, I'm not at the point of thinking about 3.x yet. And I suspect the constraint that we operate under will remain with us basically forever. It's it's basically the same problem as the operating system has, right? So you can never really ever break a huge from scratch ground up thing. At least I don't see that for us yet. So and having this train model kind of helps in avoiding this. So I think I don't want to kind of disrupt the mode in which the community is used to operate, and I think it's generally fine. So I'm nervous about switching the version number scheme to 3 digits. But
fair enough. I'm worried that we're passing up an opportunity to look at the stability, performance, supportability issues, and I want to make sure that those are still something that are on the roadmap and are still a priority. And in fact, I think need to be a bigger priority than they have been.
Yeah, maybe. If you have if you have something concrete, I think it would be good. So the storage discussion has been useful because it's very concrete. But my overall feeling is that we really should need to focus on what the user sees and less about how it's internally put together. And then
I'm not talking about architectural changes just because they're inherently better. I'm talking about things like the storage is just the one that I'm I have the best idea of what's actually going on there. But when we think about all the complaints about startup time or about things like that, it's those are user facing too.
Yeah, so startup time, for example, I mean, that's actually very quite inherently tied to the storage, actually. Because I mean,
Yeah,
you know
I'm just giving that as an example.
Yes, yeah, okay. So you're saying that that actually is, in some ways, is a visible change as
Oh
well.
yeah, everything I'm talking about, all of the conceptual stuff that I'm referring to here is very much user facing. It may not be things that somebody sees the first time they set up Jenkins,
Okay.
but it's something they'll see when they have a couple hundred jobs, or multiple masters, or worrying about HA, or things like that, that architecturally are difficult to deal with in Jenkins. The lazy loading made a huge difference on startup time, but it also has, and memory usage, but it has other costs in terms of performance if you're trying to dig through build history or things like that. So I'm just thinking about the things that I know my users complain about.
Okay. So let's see. Looking at the comment.
Front-end and new features are not the only things that are user-facing.
Right. Okay. So looking at the comment section, looks like there's a lot of conversation about the domain name.
Yeah, that ain't happening.
Yeah, the naming naming conversation is always painful, but okay. Well, let's try some more. So there are a few proposals floating around here as well. So yeah, I guess at some point we're probably good to both. So we'll figure that out. Anything else worth talking about here? Let's see. Do we have any ways to look at the Q&As that people might have submitted? This feature is disabled. Great.
Oops.
Okay. It looks like I have failed to set things up correctly.
You said questions could be asked in IRC.
Yeah.
So anyone watching, please ask questions directed to KK in IRC.
Let's see. There's some conversation during this time, but I assume it's not related. Yeah, looks like it. Okay. So I guess then, well, we can obviously we'll keep talking about this in the mailing list. So I guess I run over this by 12 minutes as well. So maybe you should call it a wrap.
I'm just seeing a question by Kostya about the organization job type plugin, which you demoed.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I need to, yeah, all right, so I need to find the link. I think it's, originally it was developed, well, yeah, I think I need to have this posted. So I don't think it's currently out there yet, although that's the intention. So yeah, you're right to point that out. You'll get that done. And you can ping Jesse. All right. Okay. So I guess in that case, thank you very much. And I hope this recording went well. So that's that. And talk to you in the mailing list and IRC. Bye.